In the clamor of a city's crossroads, where horns blared and feet hurried, a blind girl stood, clutching newspapers she could not read. Her small frame swayed under a drizzle, her unseeing eyes fixed on nothing, yet her hands offered each sheet to a world that rushed past. No one stopped. No one cared. But she, the woman who once deciphered whispers from distant wars, heard what no one else could, a voice, fragile as a sparrow's wing, rising above the din. "Ma'am, does anyone need me anymore?" The woman paused, her heart snagging on the question. Once a spy, she'd unraveled secrets buried in static. But this child's plea pierced deeper than any code. The girl's fingers trembled, not from cold, but from a longing too heavy for her years. The woman watched, unseen, her own past flickering like a half-forgotten dream. She knew silence could be a refuge, but also a cage. In that moment, under the weeping sky, she vowed to answer, not with words, but with a future. For in the girl's voice, she heard not just a question, but a challenge to mend what had been broken. The city woke to a gray dawn, its streets slick with rain that fell like a sigh. Among the clamor of vendors and the shuffle of hurried feet, she moved, a woman whose steps were silent, trained by years of slipping through shadows. Once, she had been a listener of secrets, her ears attuned to the faintest signals across continents. Now, she wandered these narrow alleys, her purpose blurred, until her eyes caught a figure at the crossroads. A girl, no older than 10, stood under a tattered awning, her blind eyes hidden behind a scarf of mist. In her hands, newspapers hung heavy with damp, offered to passers-by who barely glanced her way. The woman stopped, her breath catching at the sight of such stillness amid chaos. The child's fingers, small and pale, extended each sheet with a quiet faith, as if someone, somewhere, might pause. No one did. Cars roared past, their tires hissing on wet asphalt, and the girl remained, a statue carved from resilience. The woman lingered across the street, her coat blending with the morning fog. She saw the girl tilt her head, as if listening to the rain's rhythm, her lips moving faintly. Perhaps in prayer or memory. The woman's heart stirred, recalling her own moments of standing alone, waiting for a sign that never came. She did not approach, not yet. Something held her back. A weight of questions she couldn't name. Was it the girl's stillness, so like her own guarded heart? Or the way the rain seemed to shield her, as if the world itself conspired to keep her unseen? The woman's fingers brushed the edge of her scarf, a nervous habit from her days in the field. She wanted to cross the street, to speak, but her training held her fast, observe, assess, wait. The girl's hands moved again, offering another paper to the void. A woman with a red umbrella hurried past, her heels clicking a sharp dismissal. The girl's shoulders didn't slump, she simply waited. Her face turned toward the sound of fading steps. The woman's chest tightened. She knew this kind of waiting, not for pity, but for purpose. She stepped closer, her boots silent on the wet pavement, and stood just beyond the girl's reach. The rain fell harder now, a curtain between them, but the woman saw clearly, this was no ordinary encounter. It was a beginning, a whisper of something she could not yet name, pulling her toward a child who stood alone, yet held the weight of 1,000 untold stories. From her perch across the street, the woman watched, her eyes sharp as they had been in rooms lit only by the glow of monitors. The blind girl stood unwavering, her newspapers now sodden, their ink bleeding into the rain. The city pulsed around her, vendors shouting, horns blaring, a bicycle bell chiming faintly. But the girl was an island, untouched by the chaos. The woman noted every detail. The way the girl's scarf clung to her thin shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands as she extended a paper to a man in a gray suit. He waved her off without breaking stride. Another. A woman with a grocery bag offered a fleeting glance of pity before hurrying away. The woman's jaw tightened. She knew that look, sympathy without action. A hollow gesture that left the world unchanged. A group of boys, no older than the girl, passed by, their laughter sharp as glass. One tossed a half-eaten apple toward her feet. It rolled into the gutter, unnoticed. The girl didn't flinch, her face serene, as if she'd learned to let cruelty slide past like rain. The woman's fingers curled into her palms. She recognized that stillness, not surrender, but survival, forged in a furnace of neglect. She shifted her weight, her boots scuffing softly against the pavement, and scanned the crowd. No one lingered. No one saw the girl as more than a fleeting shadow. The woman's mind flickered to her own past, to moments when she'd stood invisible, her worth measured by what she could decode. Not who she was. She wondered what the girl carried in her silence, what stories lay folded in those unreadable papers. A street vendor nearby called out, his voice hoarse from the damp, and the girl's head tilted slightly, as if cataloging the sound. The woman noted this too, her training kicking in, every gesture a clue, every pause a cipher. She saw a boy, younger than the others, dart forward and snatch a paper from the girl's hand, laughing as he ran. The girl's lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, she reached into her stack and offered another to the air. The woman's breath caught, a memory surfacing, her own hands, steady under pressure, offering reports no one would read. She wanted to cross the street, to shield the girl from the world's indifference, but she stayed rooted, her instincts demanding patience. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the girl's scarf slipped, revealing a faint scar above her brow, a mark of some old wound. The woman's heart lurched. She knew scars, not just those that marked the skin, but those that shaped the soul. The crowd thinned, leaving the girl alone with her papers and her quiet resolve. The woman's eyes never left her, tracing the lines of a life she could only guess at. As the girl stood, unbowed by the world's disregard, the woman knew she was witnessing something sacred, a resilience that demanded not pity, but purpose. And in that moment, she felt the first stirrings of a vow, not yet spoken, to give that purpose a name. The woman lingered in the fading rain, her eyes fixed on the blind girl as the city's pulse softened. The girl's hands moved with mechanical grace, offering papers to the indifferent air, but something new caught the woman's attention, a subtle turn of the girl's head, always toward the west, each time a distant train whistle pierced the morning. It was no random gesture. The woman's mind, honed by years of tracing patterns in chaos, seized on it. She knew the body held truths the voice could not speak. The whistle sounded again, low and mournful, and the girl's face lifted, her lips parting as if to answer. The woman's pulse quickened. She knew trains, schedules, routes, their rhythms as precise as a coded signal. She stepped closer, her boots silent on the wet pavement, and began to map the girl's world. The whistle came from the old freight line, 3 blocks west, where trains passed twice daily. She recalled the station, its rusted tracks and sagging platforms, a place she'd once studied for a mission long buried in classified files. The girl's turn was no coincidence. It was a tether to something lost. The woman's thoughts raced, connecting dots. The girl's age, the timing, the station. Could this child be tied to that forgotten name? She crossed the street, her movements casual to avoid notice, and positioned herself near a lamppost, closer now to the girl. The child's scarf fluttered, her unseeing eyes fixed westward as another whistle sounded. The woman's mind churned, connecting dots, the girl's age, the timing, the station. She recalled a report, a fleeting mention of a cleaning woman at that station, vanished after an incident 2 years prior. The details were hazy, chemical spill, evacuation, and name redacted, but the woman's instincts flared. She scanned the crowd, noting a vendor packing his cart, an old man with a cane who seemed to linger too long. Her training urged caution, but her heart pressed forward. The girl's hands stilled, her stack of papers dwindling. And the woman saw her lips move again, a whisper too soft to catch. She wanted to ask, to unravel the girl's story, but her years of silence held her back. Instead, she watched, noting the rhythm of the girl's movements, the way her fingers brushed the papers as if they held more than news. The whistle faded, and the girl's head lowered, her moment of connection gone. The woman's chest ached, a memory of her own losses surfacing, faces she'd left behind, names she'd erased to survive. She knew the cost of searching for answers. But the girl's westward turn was a signal she couldn't ignore. She stepped back, blending into the crowd, and began to plan. She'd return tomorrow, check the train schedules, dig into old reports. The girl stood alone again, her scarf damp, her hands steady. The woman felt a pull, not just to know, but to act. This child, tethered to a past she couldn't see, was no longer just a figure in the rain. She was a question the woman had to answer, a signal she had to decode, not for a mission, but for a life. The woman returned at dusk, the city settling into a hum of evening lights. The blind girl was gone, her spot empty save for a soggy newspaper caught in the gutter. The woman's eyes scanned the crossroads. Landing on an old man by a tea cart, his hands gnarled as he poured steaming liquid into chipped cups. He'd been there that morning, his gaze lingering on the girl with a quiet sorrow. She approached, her voice low, her words chosen with care. "The girl who sells papers," she began. "How long has she been here?" The old man's eyes flickered, wary but kind. He set down his kettle, wiping his hands on a rag. "Since she was 6, he said, his voice rough as the pavement. "Rain or shine, she's there, holding those papers like they're her life. Never leaves. Except at night with that dog of hers." The woman nodded, her face unreadable, but her mind cataloged every word. He spoke of the girl's mother, a cleaner at the West Side station, gone 2 years now. "No one knows where," he added, "but the girl waits like she believes her ma's coming back." The woman's heart tightened, the station's name a spark in her memory. She thanked him. Slipping a coin for tea she didn't drink, and moved away, her thoughts spiraling. The old man's story was a thread, thin but strong, leading her deeper. She walked toward the station, its silhouette looming in the twilight, and recalled the incident, a gas leak, a hurried evacuation, her own signature on the order to clear the area. Had she overlooked a name, a life? The girl's mother, a shadow in a report, now felt like a weight she carried. She stood by the tracks, the air thick with the scent of rust and oil, and listened for the whistle the girl had turned toward. It came, faint but clear, and she pictured the child's face, lifted in hope. The woman's hands clenched, her old instincts warring with a new resolve. She needed answers, not just for the girl, but for herself. The old man had mentioned a dog, a crippled companion the girl spoke to as if it understood. The woman saw it in her mind, lying faithfully beside her, its eyes sharp where hers could not be. She returned to the crossroads, the tea cart now shuttered, and stood where the girl had stood. The pavement was cold, the air heavy with the day's end. She felt the girl's presence, her quiet strength, and knew this was no ordinary search. The old man's words echoed. "She talks to that dog like it's her whole world." The woman's throat tightened. She'd spent years listening to signals, but never to a child's heart. Now she would. She'd find the mother's story, trace the girl's past, not as a spy, but as someone who saw what others missed. The night deepened, and she walked away, her steps firm, the station's whistle a faint call behind her, guiding her toward a truth she hadn't sought in years, a truth that might mend what she'd unknowingly broken. The morning broke with a fragile light, the city stirring under a sky still bruised from rain. The woman returned to the crossroads, her eyes seeking the blind girl. There she was, her small figure framed by the dawn. Newspapers clutched tightly. Beside her lay a black dog, its fur matted, one leg ending in a stump. It rested its head near her feet, its eyes scanning the street with a vigilance that struck the woman as uncanny. She watched from a distance, her breath shallow, noting how the dog's gaze flicked toward her, as if it sensed her intent. The girl's hand brushed the dog's back, a gesture so tender it seemed to hold the world at bay. The woman's heart stirred. A memory of her own solitude surfacing, nights spent alone, decoding signals with no one to share the weight. The girl murmured something, her voice too soft to carry, and the dog's ears twitched, its body shifting closer. The woman saw it then. They were each other's anchor, bound by a trust deeper than words. A passerby tossed a coin, missing the tin cup, and the dog didn't stir, its focus unbroken. The woman's mind raced, piecing together the old man's words, how the girl spoke to the dog as if it heard her every thought. She stepped closer, her boots soft on the pavement, and saw the girl's lips move again, a faint smile breaking through. The dog's eyes met the woman's, steady and knowing, as if it had been waiting for her. She felt exposed, her years of concealment unraveling under that gaze. The girl offered a paper to a woman in a hurry, who ignored her, and the dog's tail flicked, a small protest. The woman's chest tightened. She knew loyalty, not the kind pledged to a cause, but the kind that lived in quiet moments, unasked for, unyielding. She remembered a partner, long gone, whose silence had been her shield. The girl's hand rested on the dog's head now, her fingers tracing its ears, and the woman saw a story in that touch. A child who'd lost everything, yet found a companion who stayed. She moved closer, her presence still unnoticed by the girl, and crouched to study the dog. Its eyes held hers, unafraid, and she felt a pang of recognition. This was no ordinary animal, it was a guardian. as she had once been. The girl's voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "You're still here, aren't you?" The woman froze, thinking the words were for her, but the girl's hand was on the dog. Her smile faint but real. The woman stood, her resolve hardening. She'd seen enough to know this child wasn't alone, not entirely. The dog was her eyes, her strength, her reason to stand each day. The woman's mission shifted, no longer just about answers, but about preserving this bond, this small sanctuary in a world that offered none. She stepped back, her eyes lingering on the pair, and knew she'd return, not as a shadow, but as someone ready to step into their light. The afternoon rain returned, softer now, a gentle veil over the crossroads. The woman approached, her steps deliberate, her heart a tangle of caution and resolve. The blind girl stood as always, her newspapers damp, her dog curled at her feet. The woman's breath caught as she neared, the air thick with the scent of wet paper and earth. She stopped a few paces away, her voice unused to kindness but steady. She reached for a coin, letting it clink into the tin cup. And the girl's head tilted, her scarf slipping to reveal a faint scar. "Ma'am," the girl said, her voice clear as a bell. "Are you someone good?" The woman froze, the question slicing through her armor. She wanted to say yes, to claim a virtue she'd long buried, but her tongue held fast. Instead, she took a newspaper, its edges soft with rain, and murmured, "Just passing through." The girl's lips curved, a smile that held no judgment, only a quiet knowing. "I can't read them," she said, her fingers brushing the paper in the woman's hand. "But I know every page by heart." The woman's throat tightened, her mind flashing to her own life, decoding messages she'd never fully understood, carrying their weight alone. She studied the girl's face, unseeing yet alive with a light she couldn't name. The dog stirred, its eyes fixed on her, and she felt its silent approval. She wanted to ask about the mother, the station, the scar, but the girl's smile stopped her. It was too soon. The rain pattered on her coat, and she saw the girl shiver, her thin frame barely shielded by a worn jacket. The woman's hand twitched, an urge to offer her scarf, but she held back, her training demanding restraint. Instead, she said, "You're out here every day." It wasn't a question, but the girl nodded, her smile fading slightly. "People need news," she said, as if it were her duty. The woman's heart ached, seeing herself in that resolved duty over self, always. She glanced at the dog, its fur damp but its gaze unwavering, and felt a kinship with its quiet vigilance. The girl's hands moved again, offering another paper to the air, and the woman saw the rhythm of her life. Stand. Offer. Wait. Repeat. She wanted to break that cycle, to give the girl more than coins or pity. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice softer now. The girl hesitated, then said, "Lila." The word hung between them, simple yet heavy, a gift the woman hadn't earned. She nodded, though Lila couldn't see, and stepped back, the newspaper clutched in her hand. The rain fell harder, blurring the edges of the moment, but the woman felt a shift. She'd crossed a line, not as a spy, but as someone who saw Lila and not just her blindness, but her strength. As she walked away, Lila's voice followed, soft as the rain. "You'll come back, won't you?" The woman didn't answer, but her heart made a promise she couldn't yet speak. Night cloaked the city, its lights dimmed by a mist that clung to the streets. The woman returned to the crossroads, a loaf of bread tucked under her arm, its warmth a small rebellion against the cold. Lila sat on the curb, her dog pressed close, the newspapers gone for the day. The woman approached, her steps softer than the night itself, and knelt beside her. Lila's head turned, her nose catching the bread scent. "You came back," she said, her voice a quiet melody. The woman placed the bread in Lila's hands, her fingers brushing the girl's cold ones. Lila's smile flickered, then steadied, and she broke the loaf, offering half to the dog. The woman watched, her heart a knot of awe and ache. She'd faced dangers that left her unshaken, but this child's simple act undid her. Lila chewed slowly, then spoke, her words slicing through the silence. "Is there a school that takes someone like me, someone who can't see, with no one to speak for them?" The woman's breath stopped, the question a blade she hadn't seen coming. She stared at Lila, her unseeing eyes searching the dark, and felt her own past rise like a tide, missions completed, lives altered. Her own hands signing orders that left others adrift. She wanted to say yes, to promise a place where Lila could belong, but her years of truth-twisting held her tongue. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice raw. "But I'll find out." Lila nodded, as if she'd expected no more, and the woman felt a crack in her carefully built walls. She saw Lila's scarf, frayed at the edges, and the dog's matted fur, and knew this moment was no accident. She'd spent her life answering to codes, not hearts, but Lila's question demanded more. The woman's mind raced, mapping possibilities, schools, shelters, systems she'd once navigated to hide, not to help. She thought of her old contacts, names she'd buried, and felt a spark of purpose. Lila broke another piece of bread, her fingers steady, and said, "Mama used to say there's a place for everyone. I just haven't found mine." The woman's chest tightened, the weight of her own choices pressing down. She saw herself in Lila's words, a wanderer, seeking a place to belong, her life a series of signals with no clear destination. The dog's eyes met hers, steady and unyielding, and she felt judged, not by Lila, but by her own silence. She stood, the bread's warmth gone, and said, "I'll look for that place." Lila's smile returned, small but bright, and the woman felt it like a light in her darkness. She turned away, the mist swallowing her steps, but Lila's question lingered, a challenge she couldn't ignore. She'd find a school, a future. Not because she was good, but because Lila deserved someone to try. As she walked into the night, the city's hum faded, and all she heard was the echo of a child's hope, pulling her toward a promise she'd never made before. The woman moved through the city's underbelly, her steps as silent as her past. The night was her ally, cloaking her as she sought answers for Lila. Her old life, decoding signals, slipping through borders, had taught her how to find what others overlooked. Now, she hunted not for secrets, but for hope. She began with the libraries, their dusty records a map of institutions for the blind, the orphaned, the forgotten. Her fingers traced names of schools, their policies rigid, their doors often closed to those without guardians. Lila's question echoed in her mind, a quiet drumbeat urging her forward. She needed a place that saw Lila's strength, not her lack. Using a burner phone, she dialed old contacts, voices from a life she'd left behind. "I need a favor," she said, her tone clipped, invoking a code name she'd sworn never to use again. It was a risk. Her identity was meant to stay buried, but Lila's face, serene yet searching, justified the breach. A former colleague, his voice wary, sent her a list of humanitarian programs. She cross-referenced them, her mind sharp, rejecting those too far or too selective. The city slept, but she did not, her desk littered with notes, each a step toward a future for Lila. She found a school, tucked in the countryside, known for taking in children others deemed lost. Its director, a woman with a reputation for defiance, accepted those with no papers, no past. The woman's pulse quickened, but she needed more, certainty that Lila would be safe, seen. She hacked into old agency databases, her fingers trembling as she bypassed firewalls, using skills she'd vowed to forget. The school's records were clean, its funding modest but steady. She dug deeper, verifying staff credentials, ensuring no shadows lurked behind its promise. The risk of exposure grew, her old life threatening to resurface, but she pressed on, driven by Lila's voice. "Is there a place for me?" The answer was forming, but it demanded sacrifice. She contacted a forger, an old ally who owed her a debt, and arranged papers for Lila, no questions asked, no traces left. The process was slow, each step a tightrope walk over her past. She thought of Lila's dog, its loyal gaze, and knew the school must accept them both. She called the director, her voice disguised, and confirmed their policy on animals. "We take the whole child," the woman said, and the woman felt a weight lift. She sat back, the city's lights flickering through her window, and saw Lila's face in her mind, unseeing, yet radiant. The search had cost her sleepless nights, favors called in, a code name revived, but it was a price she paid willingly. She'd broken rules before, but never for a cause so small, so human. The school's address lay on her desk, a beacon in the dark. She'd done what she promised, found a place where Lila could belong. As dawn broke, she felt the stirrings of redemption, not for herself, but for a girl who deserved more than a crossroads and a stack of papers. The woman closed her laptop, her heart steady, ready to take Lila to a future she'd never dared imagine. The woman sat in her dim apartment, the city's hum a distant murmur. Papers sprawled across her desk, Old agency files she'd unearthed with codes she shouldn't have remembered. Lila's question lingered, but now it was joined by a name: Anna, Lila's mother, a cleaner at the West Side station. The woman's fingers trembled as she traced the report, its words cold and clinical. Gas leak, evacuation, one casualty unaccounted for. Anna's name was there, a footnote in a tragedy the woman had authorized. Her signature stared back, a mark of a decision made in haste, prioritizing mission over lives. She closed her eyes, seeing Lila's scarf, her unseeing eyes, and felt a wound reopen. Anna had been invisible, like Lila. A woman who swept floors while the woman issued orders from a safe distance. The report detailed the incident: chemical exposure, a containment failure, Anna last seen near the source. The woman's breath hitched. She'd been miles away, listening to signals, unaware of the lives her choices touched. Lila's westward turn, her mother's absence, now made sense. The girl waited for a woman who'd never return, lost to a mistake the woman had signed. She stood, pacing, the weight of guilt pressing down. She saw Lila smile, her dog's loyal gaze, and knew she'd caused their solitude. The files offered no absolution, only facts. Anna had no family, no record beyond her job. Lila, barely 6, had been left to the streets. Her blindness a barrier no one crossed. The woman's mind raced, piecing together Lila's survival: newspapers, a dog, a crossroads. She'd endured because no one told her she couldn't. The woman's heart ached, her own past a mirror. Choices made, lives altered, no one to answer for them. She dug deeper, hoping for a trace of Anna, a chance she'd survived. But the trail ended in silence. The woman saw Lila's scar, her quiet strength, and knew she carried her mother's resilience. She thought of the school, the papers she'd forged, and felt a flicker of purpose. She couldn't undo the past, but she could shape Lila's future. The woman's hand steadied as she closed the files, her resolve hardening. She'd been a shadow, moving through lives without touching them, but Lila was different. Her question, "Is there a place for me?" was now the woman's mission. She saw Anna in Lila's smile, heard her in the girl's soft voice, and felt the weight of her own accountability. The city's lights flickered outside, and she imagined Lila at the school, her dog beside her, learning to read in a way that didn't need eyes. The woman had broken rules to find that place, but now she understood why. It wasn't redemption she sought, but repair, a chance to give Lila what she'd taken from Anna. She sat, the files heavy in her hands, and made a silent vow. Lila would not be a footnote. She'd be a story, one the woman would help write, not with signatures, but with a future where a blind girl could stand tall, seen at last. The morning was soft, the city waking under a sky brushed with gold. The woman stood at the crossroads, her heart a quiet storm as Lila gathered her few belongings: a scarf, a tin cup, the dog's worn collar. No newspapers today. The girl's hands were empty. Her face turned toward the sound of distant birds. The woman had arranged everything: papers forged, a place secured at the countryside school. She'd moved in silence, as always, leaving no trace of her name. Lila's dog stood close, its eyes on the woman, as if it knew the weight of this moment. They walked to the station, Lila's hand light on the woman's arm, her steps sure despite her blindness. The woman felt the girl's trust, fragile yet firm, and it stirred a memory of hands she'd held in another life, now gone. At the school's gate, a low stone wall framed a path lined with flowers Lila couldn't see but could smell. She paused, her nose lifting, a smile breaking through. "It's pretty here," she said. And the woman's throat tightened, hearing joy in a voice that had known so little. The director waited, her face kind but firm, ready to welcome Lila and her dog. The woman stepped back, her role nearly done, but Lila turned, her unseeing eyes searching. "Ma'am," she said, her voice soft as the dawn, "your voice, it's like Mama's. She used to sing when she worked. Like the way you whistle." The woman froze, her breath caught by the words. She'd whistled absently on their walk, a habit from her days in the field, unaware it echoed Anna's song. She saw Lila's face, radiant with memory, and felt the past collide with the present. She wanted to speak, to confess her part in Anna's loss, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she touched Lila's shoulder, a gesture too small for the weight it carried. "You'll be safe here," she said, her voice steady despite the ache. Lila nodded, her hand finding the dog's head, and stepped toward the gate. The woman watched, her heart a tangle of relief and loss. No one knew her name, her role in this quiet mission. The school's doors opened, and Lila walked forward. Her dog at her side, their bond unbroken. The woman lingered, her eyes tracing the girl's small figure until it vanished into the building. She felt the weight of her choices and his absence. Lila's solitude, her own silence. But she also felt a lightness, a sense that she'd mended something, however small. The train whistle sounded, faint in the distance. And she thought of Lila's westward turn, now answered by a new direction. She turned away, her steps heavy but sure, leaving no trace of her presence. The school's gate closed. And the woman walked into the morning, carrying Lila's smile like a signal she'd never forget, a promise kept in the quiet of a life changed. The city hummed under a twilight sky, its edges softened by the day's end. The woman returned to the crossroads, her steps slow, drawn to the bench where Lila once stood. It was empty now, the pavement bare of newspapers. The tin cup gone. She sat, her hands resting on the weathered wood, and felt the absence like a pulse. The air carried the faint scent of rain, though the sky was clear. And she saw Lila's face in her mind, unseeing, yet luminous, her smile a light that lingered. The woman's fingers traced the bench's grain, her thoughts drifting to the girl now safe at the school. Her dog beside her. She'd left no trace of herself, no name for Lila to hold, yet the act felt heavier than any mission she'd undertaken. The street was quieter now, vendors packing up, their voices fading. A train whistle sounded, distant but clear, and the woman's heart stirred, remembering Lila's westward turn. She saw the dog's eyes, its silent knowing, and felt it had judged her worthy. The bench creaked under her weight, a reminder of her own impermanence. She'd spent years as a shadow, her life measured in signals decoded, never in lives touched. Now, Lila's question, "Is there a place for me?" had rewritten her purpose. The woman's eyes scanned the crossroads, where life moved on, indifferent to the quiet victory she'd won. A boy kicked a can, its clatter echoing Lila's tin cup, and the woman smiled faintly, a rare softening of her guarded heart. She thought of Anna, the mother she'd unknowingly taken, and felt the weight of her signature on that long-ago report. There was no undoing it, but Lila's new path was a kind of amends, not forgiveness, but a step toward repair. The dog's gaze returned to her mind, its loyalty a mirror of her own resolve. She'd broken rules, revived old codes, all to give Lila a chance. The school's gate, the flowers Lila smelled, the director's kind voice, they were real now, not just promises. The woman leaned back, the bench cold against her spine, and watched the city's lights flicker on. No one clapped for her. No one knew her name, but that was as it should be. Her work had always been invisible, its impact felt in silences mended. The dog had run after Lila, its limp no barrier to its devotion. And the woman felt a kinship with its quiet strength. She stood, her coat blending with the dusk, and walked away, the bench empty behind her. The whistle sounded again, a farewell to Lila's old life. And the woman carried it with her, a signal of a mission complete, not for glory, but for a girl who deserved to be seen. The city closed around her, its rhythm unchanged, but she walked lighter, knowing she'd left something whole where there had been only fragments. Lila's smile, her voice like Anna's song, was her reward, a quiet triumph no one would ever name. Some lives are mended not by grand gestures, but by quiet acts that ripple through time. The woman, once a weaver of secrets, found her purpose in a blind girl's question, a plea that echoed her own unspoken longing. Lila, unseen by the world, carried a light that demanded to be noticed, not through pity, but through belief in her worth. The woman's journey was no redemption song. It was a reckoning, a choice to see
At 3:17 a.m., the world's
we all
pulse
carry
stopped.
signatures on
Every
reports we cannot
satellite,
erase.
navigation,
Choices
communication,
that shape
defense
lives we
went
may
dark
never
for
know.
precisely
Yet,
6
in every
seconds.
heart lies the
At
power to pause,
3:17
to
a.m.,
listen,
the
to
world's
act.
pulse
Lila
stopped.
needed no eyes
Every
to see her own
satellite,
strength.
navigation,
Only someone to
communication,
trust it was
defense
enough.
went
Her
dark
dog,
for precisely
her
6
papers,
seconds.
her
At
westward
3:17
turn, they were her
a.m., the
anchors,
world's
but the
pulse
woman gave her
stopped.
wings.
Every
This is
satellite,
the lesson.
navigation,
Not every
communication,
wound needs
defense
forgiveness.
went
Some
dark
need
for
only a
precisely
hand to
6
lift another from the
seconds.
dark.
At
The
3:17 a.m.,
who
the
hear this
world's
story
pulse
know the
stopped.
crossroads in your
Every
own life,
satellite,
moments where
navigation,
strangers' eyes
communication,
meet yours,
defense
asking to be
went
seen.
dark for
Do not
precisely
turn
6
away.
seconds.
Seek the overlooked,
At
the
3:17
silent, the
a.m., the
steadfast.
world's pulse
Find a
stopped.
child,
Every
a
satellite,
soul, a
navigation,
spark, and
communication,
offer them a
defense
future,
went
not
dark
because
for
you must,
precisely
but
6
because you can.
seconds.
Act
At
now, in the
3:17
quiet of
a.m.,
your
the
own
world's
heart,
pulse
and mend a
stopped.
world that waits for
Every
your courage.
satellite,